Hi, folks, and welcome to Israel Explained. A difficult episode for me to make. Today, we're going to be talking about what happened in Sde Teiman, which is a holding facility where Israel holds suspects of terrorism involved in October 7th and involved in the war later. So, a little background: Sde Teiman is an Air Force base in southern Israel, began to house um, prisoners in the 2014 war against Hamas, and it was natural that it was used for that purpose in this war as well. But it's been expanded significantly because so many perpetrators were involved in October 7th and involved in the war afterwards. Thousands of people have gone through the facility, well over 5,000. According to Israel, well over 1,000, possibly closer to 2,000, are either civilians who haven't done anything wrong or people who may have been involved in terrorism, but there's no proof of it. The others, the majority, are said to be members of Hamas, involved possibly in the Nukhba, involved in terrorism, involved in October 7th. A good portion of them may be innocent, but not the majority. They're kept without seeing a judge for 75 days and denied a lawyer for 90 days. They're also not allowed to see the International Committee of the Red Cross because Israel says that they're not combatants, they're criminals, and criminals don't have rights according to the Geneva Convention. But the way Israel has been treating them, according to reports that we'll talk about, is a violation of how you would treat prisoners of war, but also a violation of how you would treat regular prisoners who are convicted of crimes. So why are we talking about all this? There already have been exposés about what's going on in Sde Teiman, what's going on in this holding facility. We saw one from CNN in May and one from the New York Times in June. We'll talk a little bit about the allegations that they brought up. The Israeli government denied it. The Israeli media ignored it. And even sources that I have in the Israeli government told me that it wasn't true. Some things happened since then. The ICC and the ICJ are breathing down Israel's necks, and they have a lot of information about Sde Teiman. The UK government has been threatening to cut off arms to Israel unless it improves several elements of its human rights record, and Sde Teiman is one of the main ones. The combination of those things has made Israel change its policy on what's happening there. So the first sign we had that Israel's changing its policy today, 8 soldiers were accused of committing terrible sexual abuse against a prisoner. The way this particular case came to light is a prisoner had shown serious signs that he had been penetrated by an object in a way that he couldn't have done to himself. The other handcuffed people he was with couldn't have done. It could only have been guards, wardens, soldiers working there, and they were arrested. The military advocate general says that they have a lot of strong evidence linking these individuals to the case, aside from the circumstantial evidence that the doctors have revealed. What happened after that was a complete and total mess. The soldiers locked themselves in the base. Other soldiers in the base, their friends, were outraged. They posted videos on social media saying that they're going to break them out and that people can help them break out. Within an hour, people had showed up in the base, friends, family, supporters, right-wing extremists of various kinds, including some of the more radical members of Knesset like Tali Gottlieb and Tzvi Sukkot and others. Some of the people who showed up were masked individuals who were armed, showing the first signs of a sort of masked militia, kind of Proud Boys sort of vibe. Some of them stood around members of Knesset like Tali Gottlieb while they made declarations about how much of a betrayal it is to the soldiers that they're being arrested. And that's a very popular position in Israel. that the IDF, while they're fighting Hamas, are sacrosanct, and Hamas terrorists deserve whatever is coming to them. And that attitude has led to a sense that the guards, wardens, soldiers, and this also pertains to combat zone in Gaza, can do what they want. They feel protected. The army is scared to discipline uh, people because the reaction that people had to what happened in Sde Teiman was exactly what the army has been fearful of. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. The ICC and the ICJ investigating, and these people who think that it's an outrage if any soldier is held accountable in any way for what they do. The chief of staff and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant both came out and defended the investigation, said that raiding the base was illegal and immoral. Netanyahu spoke against storming the base, but he did not back up the investigation. And it needs to be said that one of the reasons this investigation is being held is because Netanyahu wants it to. He has fear of the ICC against him personally, and he wants some of these investigations to take it to lessen that threat to him. Because the way the ICC works, the International Criminal Court, it has a clause of complementarity. And that means that if Israel's investigating these things for itself, the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction. So the more Israel's investigating and the more fair and transparent the process, the more Israel's protected from the ICC. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of people have said that the Israeli justice system should be more involved because it actually protects Israel. But because of this political backlash, that hasn't happened so far. Um, and a lot of other politicians came out and supported the people who took over the military base. Bezalel Smotrich, for example, he said, soldiers are being arrested like common criminals. Take your hands off our fighters. And Ben-Gvir, similarly, came out against the military attorney general. But even moderate members of the Likud supported the protesters. Yuli Edelstein, who's considered one of the more moderate members of the Likud. He's the chairman of the Security and Foreign Policy Committee, so one of the most important people in the Israeli government. He said, our soldiers are not criminals, and this reprehensible persecution is not acceptable. And that shows you the level of protection that soldiers have from the Israeli government, from the Israeli media, from the Israeli public. Whatever they do right now is considered okay. Now, the police stood around for over an hour and didn't know what to do. It took them a while to get there. Once they got there, they didn't want to start fighting with soldiers and members of Knesset and God knows what. So they talked to the demonstrators and convinced them to leave. Luckily, they managed to do that. These individuals were arrested, but the resistance every step of the way is going to be very serious. And we've seen this before when Elior Azaria, an Israeli soldier, shot a terrorist who had already been disarmed and killed him, and also enjoyed massive support from the Israeli public. And that was not even at a time of war. Now, there's been a lot of warnings about Sde Teiman. As I mentioned, there were exposés in the media, but also I've been hearing for a long time that the Shin Bet, Israel's internal security service, had been warning that a disaster is about to happen in Sde Teiman. They talked about things relatively vaguely, things that didn't sound so serious, like how crowded it was, that their conditions weren't so great, and they said that it's a powder keg. I now understand that they were trying to allude to the clear crimes that were taking place in Sde Teiman and warning the government to stop. Netanyahu was somewhat responsive. He made efforts to start to close Sde Teiman, and I now understand why. But Itamar Ben-Gvir insisted on keeping it open. He kept trying to expand it. He kept trying to bring more people there. He considered it one of his great achievements to have a place where the Hamas terrorists were, and they would be kept in the worst conditions possible. It's not clear if he personally approved of these torture methods, but it is clear that he created an atmosphere where they were regarded as subhuman, which encouraged the worst possible sides of the people who were guarding them. If you're aware of the, Stanford prison experiment, for example, how easy it is for guards to treat people badly, even when they haven't committed any crimes and terrorism, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I have to say, I have to give an apology or admit that I was wrong. When I read these CNN and New York Times exposés, I didn't fully believe them. I knew people were being treated badly in Sde Teiman. This isn't news to me. It's just that the extent of the crimes described struck me as exaggerated. And I've been raised my whole life to believe that the foreign media is out to get Israel. It's not fair. CNN hates Israel. The New York Times hates Israel, all this stuff. So I asked my sources, is this true? And they said, well, there's some problems, but they're exaggerating vastly. They're lying about this. They're lying about that. And really, I shouldn't have listened. I shouldn't have listened to them. And, now that I'm going over these articles again, I see they have Israeli sources. I guess I was trying to ignore this. They have whistleblowers, Israeli doctors, Israeli soldiers. Um, a lot of the sources were the actual suspects, but what the suspects were saying and what the Israeli whistleblowers were saying, and what now is coming out in this indictment, match. And another thing, censorship has been lifted over a lot of these events. So Channel 12 News exposed today that there is a soldier in the reserves who has been arrested in June, who is suspected of multiple cases of extreme cruelty to suspects, and was recorded in multiple instances. He recorded himself, and other people recorded him too. And what I'm hearing now is that there are a lot of cases that are not quite as severe that haven't been prosecuted. There's other cases that are quite severe that they're thinking of prosecuting. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what happened, and we'll see how far they take these prosecutions. This needs to be cleaned up, and this facility needs to be closed, and needs to be taken out of the hands of Ben-Gvir, and transparency has to be introduced. So I went over what CNN and the New York Times did in May and June, and here are some quotes. An Israeli whistleblower told CNN, quote, "The beatings were not done to gather intelligence. They were done out of revenge. It was punishment for what they, the Palestinians, did on October 7th, and punishment for behavior in the camp." Now, very often, these beatings were given for the most minor infractions, like they were given blindfolds, and if they tried to look under the blindfold or tried to talk to each other, they were beaten. And again, not to gather intelligence, out of revenge. The same whistleblower said he witnessed an amputation performed on a man who had sustained injuries caused by the constant zip tying of his wrists. A doctor gave a written statement to Haaretz confirming that, and several inmates confirmed that as well. The CNN expose also has a report that seems to be borne out by the most recent events. Cited a 41-year-old detainee who said that interrogators, quote, "made me sit on something like a hot metal stick and it felt like fire." He also said that another detainee, quote, "died after they put the electric stick up his anus." The New York Times reported that, quote, "an Israeli soldier who served at the site said that fellow soldiers regularly boasted of beating detainees, saw signs that several people had been subjected to such treatment. Speaking on condition of anonymity to avoid prosecution, he said a detainee had been taken for treatment at the site's makeshift field hospital with a bone that had been broken during detention, while another was briefly taken out of sight and returned with bleeding around his ribcage. The soldier also said that one person had died at Sde Teiman from trauma injuries to his chest, though it was unclear whether his injury was sustained before or after reaching the base. The Israeli soldier who witnessed abuses at a hangar said that one detainee was beaten so hard his ribs bled after he was accused of peeking beneath his blindfold, while another was beaten after talking too loudly too often. Now, the way that it got to this stage is a systemic failure led by the government. It's easy to blame these soldiers, and they're certainly to blame, and they should pay the cost for what they did. But the government is to blame for these riots, for what's happening, for the lack of accountability, for two reasons. One, attacks on the Israeli justice system have become a matter of course. They happen all the time. The Israeli right has been attacking the justice system for many years, but since the judicial reform attempt that preceded this war, it's become a matter of course to attack the Israeli judicial system, even when it's in the ICJ defending Israel, even when the investigations that it's doing right now are in order to complement um, the international justice system to prevent Israel from being exposed to lawsuits in the ICC and the ICJ and arrests. No matter what the judiciary does, they are attacked. And we saw in this case that the military advocate general and all the different ranks working for the military advocate general were attacked and besmirched by politicians, leading to this attack. The military courts were attacked as well as the base. And there's been a complete disrespect for the Israeli judicial system, which leads to this lawlessness. And of course, there's a lack of discipline in the IDF, and that comes from the top. If you've seen any of the leaks in Israeli cabinet meetings, they include members of Knesset going after the chief of staff, going after the military, blaming them for everything that happened on October 7th, blaming them for all the failures in the war, when the buck truly stops with the politicians. But in order to try to absolve themselves from what they've done, they do nothing but attack the military command. And now the military has no backing from the government. The military has no backing from the rank and file, who see that they're being attacked and blamed by the government. Military has no backing from the families of soldiers, from civil society. So they know that if they enforce discipline in the IDF, they will pay a terrible price. And now they're seeing that. They're seeing that the base has been raided, and we don't know what consequences there will be for the military brass if they continue to prosecute soldiers. A lot of society, maybe the majority of society, thinks that whatever the IDF soldiers do, it's legal. Whatever the IDF soldiers do, it's moral, even when they're committing clear war crimes. And you have to remember, you can say Hamas deserves it, and maybe you're right. But a lot of the people in Sde Teiman are innocent. They have been released because it was seen that they have no connection to Hamas. And this lack of discipline also broadcasts and affects the war in Gaza. And that's why we see soldiers rummaging through the lingerie of women, blowing up houses, killing civilians when so that could be avoided, getting to the point where they were even shooting Israeli hostages who came out with a white flag. And the attacks on the judicial system, more than they hurt Palestinians, they hurt Israelis. Israel is going to end up without a functioning judicial system, which will not only expose it to the ICC and the ICJ, but will also stop it from being a country with the rule of law. There is no upside to violating human rights. There is no upside to committing war crimes. There is no upside to trying to destroy your own justice system. Not only does it harm the Palestinians, it also harms Israel. In this case, we have a united interest in maintaining justice, in maintaining functioning state, in protecting human rights. It's not good for the Palestinians. It's good for everyone. Israel needs to take a step back because what it's doing now is not only harming the Palestinians, not only harming Israel's standing in the world, but also harming its own society. Yeah, I don't feel like promoting anything today or anything like that. I don't have any questions, thankfully. I'm sorry I went on a rant, but this one's very important to me. I will see you here next time.